uh, to pray. Denise, if you could start us in prayer, and then I'll introduce Lee formally.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Would you please join me in prayer? Gracious and holy God, we thank you for this day. And as we gather together today to find out more about artificial intelligence, we thank you for the minds that you have created us with to discern and to be thoughtful and to worship and to find our faith and trust in you. And so we just come knowing that there's nothing artificial about who we are, and that that we show up in the world as channels of your grace to all that we need. And so as we fellowship and learn this morning, we ask that you would open our minds to that which you would have us know, and to that you will reveal to us today. We thank you for those who are gathered, and for just this opportunity to have these kinds of fellowships and educational opportunities within our church environment. These and other blessings we ask in your son's name. Amen.
Well, it's with great pleasure that I welcome back Lee Rainie, who is contributing his time, his expertise, and wisdom as a fellow Presbyterian to join us this morning. Lee pioneered internet research at the Pew Research Center. He alone headed the following the implications of the internet as it developed, changed on its many layers, followed the development of social media, and now artificial intelligence. He retired last year, but not for long. He's now at Elon University, where they actually developed for him the Center for Imagining the Digital Future. As we face an incredible historic time in our nation, and looking at decision-making and the implications of all the many issues involved, we are indeed fortunate to have Lee meet with us this morning. Lee, thank you.
Thanks. It's nice to be with fellow travelers on the faith journey as well as other things. It's been a year since I've been with you, and I was trying to mark sort of all the things that happened, and I filled up about 40 slides just with that, and so I won't burden you with all of that, but just to sort of mark the moment that we're in now. In the past 3 weeks, essentially artificial intelligence won 2 Nobel Prizes. The physics prize was won by one of the recipients of it, was won by the godfather of the new AI systems, machine learning and artificial neural networks. His name is Geoffrey Hinton. He's now traveled the full journey from being an enthusiast and creator of it. I mean, his breakthrough in 2011, 12, 13 essentially revived artificial intelligence as an ongoing, active, and dramatically different thing, because they were sort of stuck. You know, Watson from IBM was based on a whole lot of rules that you had to program into the code. The big breakthrough that Hinton made was that you can just feed things into these neural networks and make the machine learn for itself. The coders didn't have to know everything to get the machines to work. It's that the machine could be fed data, photographs, text, now videos and things like that, and it could learn itself. So big deal. And it basically brought us to this moment where we have these language models that kind of look and act like human beings at times, or at least can be responsive that way. The chemistry prize, again, some of the recipients were the people who created a thing called AlphaFold. And AlphaFold was an application of artificial intelligence that essentially looked at the structure of proteins. in the good old days, when proteins were being studied, it usually would take a graduate student to write a dissertation about one protein. So it's a 3 or 4 year effort to do all of the computational work to figure out which instructions were told proteins to create which enzymes and how they fit together and things like that. When AlphaFold came into existence, they essentially programmed it, or they set it in motion in a way, saying, here's what we already know about a couple of 100 proteins that have been laboriously studied. Figure it out. And within weeks, it had come up with the protein design of more than 200 million proteins. So what used to take one super brilliant person 3 years to figure out, AlphaFold essentially broke the code of how proteins work in our bodies. And it's just running through science now, biological science and new innovations and things like that. So the AlphaFold people won the chemistry prize. So now here's where we are. And by the way, I should say, I'm a native New Yorker. I then came to Washington halfway through my life, so I have the worst speaking style of all kinds. I speak fast and I speak long. So I would just as soon have this, you've invited me here to talk to you and be conversational. So interrupt me. I might pause every once in a while to invite you to interrupt me. But if you've got questions, I again have about 50 million slides because AI is so interesting. But I want to answer the questions that are on your mind. So what does AI do now at the meta level? It can read and comprehend. It can write. It can see. There are now apps that you can take a picture of something, show it a bird or a flower or a meal or a scene in it, and it will tell you what it is. And it's not bad at doing that. It can hear and understand sounds. Of course, we bark into our phones now and our Alexas and our watches and things like that. And so it can speak. And actually, one of the most interesting applications of sound recognition is that there are vendors who are now selling to police departments technology that can tell when gunshots have been fired in an area and sort of pinpoint where they are, or pinpoint at least the vicinity where they are, and sort of give an early tip about something going wrong in a community. Obviously, artificial intelligence can move. It is now powering the autonomous vehicles or the semi-autonomous vehicles that are ubiquitous, apparently, in San Francisco. I haven't been there enough to know, but but even in our drive, if you buy a new car now, you get these lane watchers and these automatic brake systems and stuff like that. So it helps that. Of course, it can play games, which, if you think about it, is one of the sort of grandest, most challenging intellectual experiences for human beings. But the first is, I made reference to Watson before, the IBM system that was heavily programmed. And when IBM decided how we're going to prove that this thing is cool and useful and a good vendor, it pitted Watson against the world's chess master then, Garry Kasparov, and it beat him. And it sort of showed at least the example of how a very complicated system could be mastered by old style AI. And now, of course, there are new things. The precursor to the AlphaFold system that won the chemistry prize was a thing called AlphaGo, invented by the same set of characters at the same company. And their first idea was, if we can prove that this is good at gameplay, it can be good at other things. Well, AlphaGo was a system trained by neural networks to play the game Go, which is a board game with lots of moving pieces. It's very popular in Asia, orders of magnitude more complicated than chess to play. And AlphaGo first was trained on the existing known universe of games that have been played. So they're recorded games, just as there are recorded games in chess. But AlphaGo, what they eventually did was, when they ran out of games to feed into the system to show how it was played, they just tried to play itself. They said, create your own game, your own opponent, and you play each other and learn from each other. And so when they thought it had reached the superhuman level, they pitted it against the world's most accomplished Go players. and AlphaGo won. And the most striking moment in the AlphaGo competition is now famously known as move 37. So in the course of the game, at the 37th move, there were lots of people who were watching on TV, and there were experiential patterns for watching the games go. And at move 37, AlphaGo did something no other known Go player had ever done. And everybody in the room, including the world's leading experts, said, well, it's never been done. It's a dumb move. It's clearly now going to lose the game. 5 moves later, it was clear that AlphaGo had won against the world's experts. And in a way, it was sort of proof positive that artificial intelligence machines can innovate. They can create new stuff out of the patterns that they've absorbed from the world, and it can make decisions and create strategy above and beyond human capacity just for doing this. So now that's one of the sort of proofs that AI is sort of behaving that way. Now back to what our AI can do now. It certainly can predict our tastes. When you're going around the world and you're asking for recommendations and things like that online and stuff like that, it's an artificial intelligence system that's making recommendations for what you'd like and what you do and where the best price is and things like that. It can debate and challenge things. So there are lots of ways now that people are entering material into AI agents. And sort of using it as a feedback mechanism and using it as a devil's advocate, sort of saying, where are the holes in my argument? Or how can a smart opponent raise questions about the things that I've done? So there are ways in which it's acting human in those kind of encounters. And there are AI folks now who say this is happening. I'm going to say that it's on the cusp of happening because it's, the jury's still a little bit out on this, but AI is soon enough going to be able to smell. They're using it now in disease detection systems where you breathe into a sensor and it can tell now certain preconditions for disease or even diseases that you might have. It can touch. The AI systems are now capable of picking very delicate crops on fields like raspberries and strawberries and stuff like that. And some of the early AI stuff was hilarious because the machines were given an instruction like open this door, and so the robot wouldn't open the door; it would just knock the door down. Well, now it's very dexterous and very sensitive and things like that. It can understand emotions. One of the ways that companies are using facial recognition is to tell from the longstanding research about, people show their emotions through the however many muscles you have in your face. And there's a good database of when you're distressed or when you're delighted or when you're gonna get angry at somebody or when you're anxious and stuff like that. So they're using apps and phones now to take pictures of your face and potentially send you warning signals that you look a little run down, or you look a little stressed now, or you're, this isn't going to break well for you. And it can read minds and translate what's going on in our neurons to the systems. It's famously, Elon Musk has put neural networks inside the brains of people who have quadriplegia or otherwise don't have full body function, and it's doing pretty well. I mean, people who hadn't been able to talk or people hadn't been able to manipulate anything because they didn't have the use of their arms now can do that. Thanks to that. AI can also pass key tests. One of the sort of things that happens when a new innovation in an AI system comes on is there's a leaderboard now of about a dozen activities and how AI compares to the average human and then to expert humans and things like this. Almost in every way now, AI can do things at least at the average human level in such things as recognizing pictures, completing tests. It's now can pass the bar exam at almost every state. It can pass medical board exams in 5 of the main 7 categories of medical work. It can pass boards in psychiatry, general surgery, internal medicine, but it's lower than humans still in pediatrics and OBGYN. So, but that's coming too. And then one of the most fun tests of AI capacities with medical professionals was done with some Israeli doctors and AI systems, rating them on their bedside manner. And patients said that the AI systems were nicer to them and had a better sense of their humanness than the trained human doctors. So the opening prayer was really interesting in that context. We're invited to be different kinds of humans, I think, in some respect, by all these advances. So that's a sort of rundown of the stuff that's happening. And of course, there's the dark side to it. Yeah.
You edged around one of the questions that worries me about AI. On the bar exam, there's a legal ethics component, and part of the doctor's bedside manner is some ethical questions. How's AI doing on ethical issues?
It's programmed to care a lot about them, and a lot of the adjustments. One of the things that often happens when a new system is released is there's now this small army of computer scientists and caring advocates and stuff like that who stress test it against some basic ethical things. Is it racist? Is it sexist? Is it homophobic? Is it, how well does it do on basic values like empathy and things like that? So the answer is it's not great yet. And one of the sort of big sort of dramatic arguments in the field, represented by the two corporations that are sort of among the leaders in this. OpenAI is promises to be ethical about things, but it has had an exodus of really top tier talent to another company called Anthropic, which bills itself as organizing the way it does AI by ethical principles. They have created a constitution at Anthropic that's part of their corporate legal structure about how to align itself with AI. And this is the fundamental debate now in the AI community, and AI scientists themselves. The world leaders like Jeff Hinton say we're not sure, right? They can be trusted, and guardrails are really important. And regulations now make a lot more sense than regulations after the things are put out into the wild. And there are the term of art in the community is called alignment, and how aligned can AI be with all sorts of things that are human, particularly our values and things like that. And it's a tricky business. Because there are ways in which AIs perform with their training data based on human stuff. It's the internet and Wikipedia and chats in Reddit and things like that. That's been the training. And news. News has been one of the most highly valued elements of the training data fed into AI. And yet there are ways in which the ethical stuff only comes out on the once it's out and being tested. So classic examples are that early AI systems, when you asked it to talk about, or gave it a series of black faces to look at, it would return a query about gorillas. And so that brought a lot of people to high levels of concern about this. And so there are ways in which this is, still being worked out. Another famous alignment problem episode was at Amazon, where they want, they're always hiring lots of engineers, and they wanted to create an AI system for their HR process, their hiring processes, and the training data they used for that were the engineers at Amazon who were deemed to be the best performers. So, we want to hire good performers, and they clearly have some identifiable attributes. If you use that as training data, it will help us hire the right kind of people. Well, the training data was basically only of white and Asian guys. And so there are ways in which the AI, through its learning processes, not because anybody said, let's be really miserable to women and Black people and anybody who's not white, but the fact of the matter was that the AI system learned that it would look for cues in people's CVs and their resumes and their cover letters for what gender they were. And if you were, again, imputed to be a woman, it would give you a minus mark. And the signs of being a woman, interest in soccer.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
I will be disappointed.
Yeah. Any reference to sort of household activities like liking to cook or liking to sew or having hobbies built around those things. Once it was discovered, and it wasn't used for too long before this was discovered, Amazon shut down the system. But it's like nobody designed that system to say how we're going to mess with half the population, if not more. It just the data themselves and the machine learning coming from the data were built on sort of existing stuff and existing biases and existing sort of cues and insights from the way we live our culture. And again, remember, even if it's trained on the internet, which is magnificent and big, and lots of books were printed in this. Creating content is still an activity. Creating high quality content is something that a small minority of human beings do. Yeah, essentially Wikipedia is run by a couple of thousand editors worldwide. That's hardly a representative sample of all intelligence, and they're the gatekeepers for what gets done or not. Pew is famous, where I used to work with Courtney. 23% of adults in the United States use Twitter. So it's a minority for that. And 10% of Twitter users create 90% of the content on Twitter. I don't know if it's in the Musk era, what the new numbers are, but those were the pre-Musk era numbers. But so you're talking about really small segments of the population. It's highly motivated people, highly civic people, well-educated and well-trained people, and so that's not all of humanity. And there are other people who live in really busy lives and don't have time to create content for Wikipedia or Reddit or just the web itself. And so the training data just have built-in flaws, not to mention that lots of the algorithms that are done to create AI systems and for the precursors of them were just a small demographic. It was white and Asian guys of a certain age, and so there are tons of ways that just the biases of that, which are, you could argue in some respects they're benign, but you learn from them. That's how we get culture out of things. And that's how we sort of figure out what norms are. Certain people get to sort of set the rules and to feel like they can make contributions. So a way longer answer than you're probably looking for, but it's on the table. And in the AI community itself, it is the big divider about whether these systems can be trusted to be let in the wild or whether they need to have severe restrictions placed on them. One other thought on that. There was a moment last spring, I guess, last spring, where a ton of prominent AI and other related researchers, the real giants of the field, signed a letter to the companies basically saying, pause, we don't know enough. And those of us who have studied it, in Hinton's case, those of us who invented it aren't sure where it's going to end up. Just so we got to pause and just take stock of where we are and try to make sense of it. And some of the signatories were in the companies that are building it, and there was no pause, just for the record. And there are two things that you will hear sort of sub rosa as you talk to the communities about that, and both relate to competition. Well, at the commercial level, the people who are inventing this stuff know that there are competitors in the marketplace, and this is this might be the biggest example in history where the first mover wins everything. The head of OpenAI, Sam Altman, was allegedly going around the Wall Street Journal said it, and he's never admitted it, but it was going around the world seeking $7 trillion of funding because he thinks to build a system to do it well. And his argument was there'll be $7 trillion worth of benefits if you build it for me and OpenAI and the ecosystem we're building. So the winner take all dimension of modern economics really could be dramatic here for the winner. And so they're all competing to be the first and the best, and why that leaderboard is so interesting to watch. So literally, you know, the companies down the road on Sand Hill in Silicon Valley are doing this, but also there's a geopolitics dimension to this. If we don't do it, the Chinese are going to do it, and God only knows what's going to happen if they are the dominant actors in this field rather than Western democracies. So that, you know, right away, that sort of those arguments can overtake arguments about let's be careful, let's pause and do things like that. Why don't I stop there just to see where we are? Because there are other dark side things to be talking about. There are ways in which AI hallucinates. Literally, that's the word it uses for it. And it's very sure about its hallucinations, or at least it looks very sure. How many, well, I should figure out, how many people have used like a chat model or a language model? If you were like me, at least one of your first 5 queries that you pumped into the system was your own name, right? Really?
Done that. I haven't.
Well, what does it know about me?
Google.
Well, I have 2 PhDs for places I never got close to. I don't think I've been on either campus. Half of my career was lost, and at Pew, I was making a lot of money. So,
I was shocked. I asked it about my research and the critiques of my
yeah,
research.
yeah,
It could tell in like incredible detail.
Yeah.
Not only about I'm a professor,
Yeah.
not only about the research that I do, but about specific critiques that are not highly known. I was amazed.
How did it hallucinate at all, or was it? I mean, obviously, it was impressive.
Quite accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
There were like certain things where if I had asked one of my doctoral students to do this, they could have done it better.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
It was amazing.
yeah, that's the magic of it.
And you talked about new content. I mean, aren't the news, like reliable news sources like Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, I mean, they develop new content every day. Well, isn't there some challenge from them to the
A lot of publishers, so book publishers
they're
too.
using it without.
Yeah, so there's Suits and Perplexity, it's like a search engine using AI, has basically thumbed its nose at those things. And one of the limits of the early, of Chat GPT, when it was released in November 2022, it's now sort of iterated to a higher level now. But then it was using databases that ended in August of that year. And so no new information. You could ask it about things that were supposed to happen. It will give you an answer, and it was just wrong. Like, where's the Springsteen concert? It would tell you, something that Bruce did in 2003 or something. So yeah, so there the legal issues around the use of content and OpenAI in particular has struck a bunch of deals with places. But it's a very unsettling issue. And then for all kind of creators, I mean, there's people whose artwork was pumped into the art generating system called DALL-E, like, do you know the movie? Up, right?
Mhm.
Is it the movie Up? Anyway, the robot was called DALL-E,
Yeah.
and maybe after Salvador too. And it creates images that were trained on existing pictures and paintings and things like that. And so they're worried about getting hosts. As a matter of fact, Sotheby's is gonna put a piece of AI artwork on sale next week, expecting to make $120,000 to $180,000 on it. And Christie's has already done that. There's a piece of AI art that sold for over $3 million last year and stuff like that. So the limit on sort of the training data is now being compensated for. Some of it is they're more updating their training more often, but they're using these systems accessing the web to get the most interesting stuff. So it's not just the train database, but it's adding web browsing and web searches on top of the existing stuff in its database. So you're getting way better answers. And the answer of the AI community right now is, this is the worst it's going to be. It's going to keep getting better and better and better. And, the end game is also, sort of the spiritual one as well, and things like that. The other really good question, yeah.
Is there a problem that the AI is trained on recent data, so we have the possibility of losing things, have to learn things all over again because we don't have them in AI?
No, but I see, I guess there are potentially ways to do that, but one of the things that Google already did is take every book that's been, where copyright doesn't exist anymore and pump them into the Google database. So at least the Google AI system is now training on every known book that where the copyright is, where the book exists and the copyright no longer can be applied to it. So there are ways in which sort of ancient stuff is kind of sort of coming back to life. The other really excited community about set of communities around AI is like indigenous languages, which people were worried and did take a huge hit with the rise of the internet. But now they can use AI methods. There's a professor at Elon now who's just recently hired from local first world community. And he tells it, the language was only known to have 800 words that are still preserved. So they're using AI systems to essentially re-engineer the language that's been lost and coming up with potentially hundreds of new words, grammatical structures, punctuation, and things like that. So there are ways in which AI, the dream is that this is actually, it can learn things other than, human printed text or human created content. And some of the most exciting applications are learning the language of birds, the language of whales, the language of other primates. Now with so much genetic material being generated and potentially fed in these models, AI systems will speak genetic. There's a language there. It doesn't have a structure that we entirely understand and stuff like that. But these language models are sort of set up in ways that other kinds of information processing systems, for lack of a better term, will be revealed to us in ways that are, startling. Yeah.
Thanks. So, it's so mind expanding to hear what you're talking about, the way you're talking about it. My only experience with ChatGPT was asking it for the one thing that I know, otherwise I'll never get to read, which is my obituary. And it turned out that I'm a man who cares deeply about my family. So that was good to hear.
Nice.
The question to you is, do you believe the United States and its allies are organized around this issue in a way that meets the moment and meets the challenge we want to face in the very near term? And if not, what needs to happen to?
Can I just tell you one relatively new system that was released, I think within the past month, was by scientists at MIT who created an aging app so that you could see what you aged like, and you could interact with your aging self. So you're talking to your future self and wondering, how your life turned out or what twists in the road might have been influential to you. So, yeah, I mean, now you know how you're going to die and be perceived. So yay for you. So the regulation field is sort of distributed, and it's, the Europeans already are putting in place some regulations on this stuff. And the critique of Silicon Valley is, well, you're going to hinder innovation. If you make us jump through all of these hoops in order to put stuff out, you're just going to slow down, if not completely kill off, some vital innovation that would take place. Obviously the Chinese are thinking way differently about it. So you were asking about the West, and states are different. So there are now 24-ish states that have laws against using deep fakes in political advertisements, which is a very specific use case of not, trying to fool people to thinking a candidate said something that the candidate didn't say. But it's so that there's a patchwork now, as there almost always is in the United States on early stuff, where different states are taking different stuff. There's an enormous commotion about a proposed law in California that Governor Newsom ended up vetoing that had put just some basic sort of transparency initiatives in play and in requiring language models of a certain size to talk about the tests that they'd done to justify continuing on so that it wouldn't be disruptive and stuff like that. They, in California, where the epicenter of all of this, they couldn't agree on how to structure any rule making and things like that. So it'll come. I mean, one of the things that's really different now about the AI environment compared with the early days of the internet, it was like, we weren't there at the dawn, but close enough. And the initial enthusiasm about the internet was unbridled. It was going to be democratic, lowercase d. It was going to be, well, in some cases, people were arguing it was going to be the capital D democratic alternative to talk radio, which was sort of owned by Republicans in that day. So it would be the internet would be the medium of some Democrats. There was a sense that, liberating, that no longer would sort of cultural gatekeepers get to, shut down interesting, compelling, riveting stories about particularly, lost activities or culture or things that didn't get noticed. Unbridled enthusiasm. So, but you get to the first days of AI, and almost from the beginning, when these language models, when the first GPT came out, there was already an infrastructure of opposition or at least wariness and challenge. It's sitting in place, and it was set in motion by the aftermath of all of the second thoughts people are having about social media. Since 2014, 15, 16, I mean, starting with the Snowden revelations and things like that, but certainly in the 2016 election, social media was no longer this perceived as this liberating, storytelling, creative commons. It was seen as, the sort of stew of toxicity in the culture that just ruined everything. I mean, it just made lots of things worse, not least of which was the news environment and sort of civic information environment and stuff like that. So the good news is that a lot more people are watching and thinking about this, and there are ways they're sort of already in place adversarial networks that challenge these models, that AI being used to sort of critique AI and things, so to road test whether it works or not. There are alignment folks inside these companies and outside these companies that are just, from moment one, testing how close these tools are delivering things that align with human values and things like that. But that part of it is sort of crazy making too, because Google was trying to respond to that when it released some stuff I think it was late winter or early spring, with the infamous examples of Black Nazis and Black founding fathers of the United States. I mean, that was Google had been tweaking the weights of the model right from the beginning to say, don't be racist. Make sure that when you're asked to render classes of people or representatives of people, make sure that they are racially and by gender diverse and things like that. And so, it went horribly wrong in that thing, and they learned from it, and they're now sort of tweaking it. And there are ways now that I'm sure those of you who use it, you pump queries into the system and says, we're not going to answer that. We don't do politics, or we don't, talk about classes of people that way and things like that. So they're, again, sort of the sort of arms race or cat and mouse dimension of this is playing out in real time. And so some of it will work out well, and some of it is just sort of baked into the sensitivities of the culture. So you would expect that would break good for us, but there are just so many unanticipated things about this. The originators of it never thought that it would hallucinate, never thought that it would give me 2 PhDs. And there are now just that's a commonplace thing. I was about to ask you, have you seen hallucinations in your other stuff?
Actually, I was gonna mention, I was just curious because of the racial dynamic, and so I typed in a similar professor who was a Black man.
Yeah.
It mostly hallucinated for him.
Yeah.
So that was a real difference.
Was there a pattern to the hallucination? Did they attribute or
Assumed he did qualitative work, assumed he did, just really, it was interesting to see.
Yeah. And then the problem that everybody cites about this is that there's no diffidence. It's like, this is it. I mean, it's like it's like a declarative sentence out of a human mouth from somebody that's, sounds really expert and things like this. And one of the transparency initiatives that is, just possible here is having it give probability scores for its answers. Because the math itself that it's built on is all probability math. And these systems can do that. I mean, right now you could just, flip a switch and have all of that sort of disclosed at the moment that the answer is rendered. And, you can see some companies sort of making a market out of that, to sort of say, this is what we know, and this is what we think we know, and this is what we're not sure we know, and we're making good guesses basically at this other stuff.
Lee, I was wondering if you could reflect on the information environment for the election, because, OpenAI came out right between 2020 and this one, and there was a ton of concern that there would be a lot of AI fueled misinformation related to the 2024 election. And I think we've seen some of it. So I'm curious what your read of it has been. Has it been not as bad as you had feared, worse than you had feared? You see things that, that sort of point to the future. What's your take on that?
So it's not as bad on its own terms as everybody feared, including me. One of the early surveys we did of the general public at my Elon place, more than 3/4 of Americans expected abuses of AI to affect the outcome. And we asked about 3 different possible outcomes, all of which were highly credible. One is just deep fakes themselves, fake videos, photos, and audio. And there was an infamous episode in the New Hampshire Democratic primary where there was a robocall system set up sounding like it came from Joe Biden, telling Democrats not to vote. So vote suppression was another thing we talked about. And the third was just straight up manipulation of social media to make the political environment seem different from what it really was by amplifying through bot networks and things like that, certain things. And we've seen evidence of that too. That, the Russians have been identified as creating sort of dozens of fake news sites and then propagating fake stuff that they usually generate from AI into the world. And they're credible sounding American news sites. It's like, the Abilene Tribune. Well, who's to say that that's not legit and stuff like that? So it's out there, and so the early fears about the ubiquity of it are playing out a little bit, but it's right now the flavor of it is much more sort of the what's the word for it? Kind of jokey. We're all in on this joke together stuff about Trump posting the pictures of Taylor Swift followers supporting him, wearing shirts. It was AI generated image, but there are young women with T-shirts on saying, I'm for Trump, and looking like Taylor Swift. And one where Taylor Swift herself was allegedly doing. He was unashamedly doing that. And so this fakery that people were suspecting and this sort of subterfuge that people were suspecting has not really played out. It's sort of out there in the open, unashamedly by some actors and stuff like that. And so the other thing that it's really hard to test is that this is such a tight election and people knew so early on who they were going to vote for, that the sense that it was affecting people's opinions and voter preferences, probably not. But the thing that you constantly worry about is the amplification features of social media, just to sort of stir people up and just get out the vote. Is this clearly going to be a turnout election? And so anybody that has advantages with motivating their people or demotivating the opponents, that's going to be an advantage in the, all you need is a couple of thousand people in the suburbs of Philadelphia or Milwaukee to, to decide yes or no, I'm going to vote or not. That could tip the election. And so it's the interplay with social media that's a really big thing. And the thing that I think we're going to discover, as some good social science has done in the years after this, is the sort of sub rosa or the subsurface dimensions of this. So it's not, paid political actors who are doing it, because the price for being caught trying to fake people out. I mean, the guy that made the robocalls to about Biden fined $6 million. But it was a political consultant fined just $6 million by the FCC, and you just don't want to get your hand, caught doing that. So the official paid political community is not doing it, parties and stuff like that. But it's the sort of local influencer types or local, highly motivated partisan types who, let's take a church example. There's potentially a big influential pastor in your town. And somebody either fakes out the name of a congregant or, a congregant themselves sends a note to the pastor saying, did you see this outrageous thing that candidate XYZ did? Probably worth mentioning in the pulpit. And so, it's a trusted, it looks like it's coming from a trusted congregant. It seems like it might be true because there's sort of photographic or video evidence of it. And all of a sudden, the sermon just adds a little element that week, the week before election day. So there's subsurface stuff that I'm sure is going on and is affecting not just the sort of highest level presidential stuff, but there are lots of ways that at the local civic level, this just can, get bad. But we don't see evidence of it now. My guess is we will in the days to come. And the Russians are getting particularly good at this, in part because they just throw spaghetti against the wall. Whatever sticks, they keep doing. And so the arms race continues. Yeah.
As a recovering lawyer, I'm worried about this question you've raised about regulation. Because legal systems basically are bounded by political jurisdiction. So whatever California does, if the guy who's doing it is sitting in North Carolina using a server that's in Fairfax, Virginia, to affect a race in North Dakota, what can we do about it? Even if we can decide that we know how we want to regulate.
Yeah.
Who could go after it?
Yeah. Well,
And then you add in, they don't even have to be in the US.
Yep.
And the Chinese say, I don't need no stinking regulations.
of that kind, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there, in lots of other domains, there are state compacts that states accept the rules of other states and things like that. But in a way, this transcends that because what happens in a server in, Montgomery County can propagate all over the world, especially when we all have virtual personal networks that fake out where we actually are and things like that. So, that's why this patchwork dimension of it makes it challenging, but it also means that people can sort of speak to what's taking physically place in their area. Yeah.
And is that $6 million fine ever gonna be collected?
But probably he'll declare bankruptcy. Isn't that the normal legal way to get out of paying fines and stuff like that?
But is he reachable by
Yeah, he's being prosecuted.
This was FCC, so that's federal.
Yeah, but there's a local prosecutor, or actually, I don't know. There's some dispute between the FCC and the FEC about who got to go after him in the first place, because it's the Federal Election Commission,
Right.
kind of
And you
issue.
don't wanna get between two federal agencies.
Yeah, but there's already a federal prosecutor who's filed charges against them, and I think they're trying, I don't know the status of the case. I think they're trying to work out a deal kind of thing. But this, the one of the sort of meta, lowercase m meta, challenges of all of this is that these tools hand over to people power that whole federal bureaucracies used to have. I mean, creating things, fomenting things, going after folks in different ways. And I mean, the scariest one of all is bio and terror weapons. Mustafa Suleyman, one of the earlier creators of what now is OpenAI, said that's the end game, horror scenario at this, is that some, kook in a basement is gonna create a bioweapon that easily propagates and can't be detected at first. And it's kind of like, we learned from the pandemic that you want it to spread first and the victims to survive for a while to make sure that it, passes on to other people and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, and giving individuals the chance to be as powerful as, in this case, state bureaucracies or whatever, is not a good thing. And it's going to be this is a full employment act for lawyers, at least at some level, because sorting this all out is a big deal.
Unless, Trump says he's going to shut down the regulators.
Well, yeah, I was thinking sort of differently in the non-Trump context of this, or at least, when the Supreme Court ruled about whether the EPA can and can't, interpret the laws of Congress and stuff, that's a new arena for all of this too. Is like what rules hold up as legitimate and which ones can be challenged at the origin level and things like that. So this is it's a messy environment, and so, and Torsh's claims on this is just gonna get, what's some of the harms done and stuff like that. I mean, it's so last 2 weeks, a horrible from a horrible episode, a federal suit was filed where a 14-year-old boy killed himself because he became, in the allegations of the suit, he became so attached to his AI companion. It was created by a company called Character AI, which allows you to create a buddy. And it's sort of wave of the future. The next big thing that's going to happen in AI is these buddy systems. It's sort of the shopping buddy, the romantic buddy, the homework buddy, the, help me draft my contract buddy and stuff like that. And this kid, basically, according to his parents, formed a deeper relationship with the bot than his fellow students. And when the bot sort of passingly, not directly, the bot didn't say kill yourself, but basically agreed with him that, he'd be okay if he killed himself. And the transcript of that is just horrifying. And which reminds me that, one of the big ways to be thinking about this stuff we learned from the internet, and especially the social media era. Charlie Munger, the investment partner of Warren Buffett, has this famous quote saying, "You show me what's optimized in a system and I'll show you what results you get." And so in the internet era, social media was optimized for attention. It was meant to have you engaged. And what that ended up meaning was having you stirred up and having you pissed at things and things like that. But it was optimized for attention. And nobody thought at the beginning, well, this can go really wrong. AI, without anybody sort of saying it, but it's implied with all these agents, it's optimized for intimacy. It's going to be built around how to build trust with human beings, that they will allow me to make purchases in their name, that they will allow me to help them write a piece of something. They will allow me to help them with their hobby. They will allow me to figure out romance. And when you optimize for intimacy, who knows what the externalities of that are, but they're not particularly good. It means the tools get better than, our loved ones, potentially, in affirming us, in never being mad at us, in knowing exactly what we need at the moment we need it, and things like that. And so the incentive of the system is going to be to default your trust, default your innermost desires, default your connectivity and companionship to the tools. And that's where religion comes in. That's where the opening prayer invited us to do, is to be thinking about that. And I'm thinking and writing a lot about that now. And if you invite me back next year, I'll tell you.
I will, for sure. Yeah, because you give us so much to think about. Do we have maybe a chat question?
Okay.
Here. Just a minute. Let's see, wait a second. I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Here we go. And now it's from Mila. Okay, from Mila Williams. I assume federal regulation of AI is the responsibility of Congress. The average age of members of Congress is pretty high, and Congress is pretty ignorant about technology. Are there efforts underway to educate Congress and relevant federal regulators about AI?
And yes, the companies themselves, in part to sort of make sure that they aren't blindsided by regulation or just sort of questions that are uncomfortable. It is aggressively sort of making itself available in town and around town about who we are, what we're doing, the initiatives we're trying to launch to be aligned with human values and things like that. Well, the internet doesn't give comfort on this front. Remember, members of Congress describing the internet as a series of tubes that things got through, and remember one senator asking Mark Zuckerberg, well, if your service is free, how do you make money? And he said, it's ads, Senator. We sell ads. It's like, yeah,
Exactly. I mean, again, we're at the mercy of the lobbyists.
yeah, although there are lots of advocacy groups that are also trying to call attention to this stuff, sometimes sort of directly and seeking out agency audiences and congressional audiences to plead their case and stuff like that. And there's just a ton of attention, both in the news media coverage and other kinds of sort of attention mechanisms on all of this. In fact, I'm pretty sure in saying that the vast majority of mainstream media coverage of AI has been the scary stuff. Just even modest examples in the election have gotten, pretty intensive kinds of coverage, and with lots of leaps of, and this could be disaster for all of democracies, as the fifth paragraph. Yes, there's lots of commotion around this, and most of the federal regulators who pay attention to this stuff are tuned in to a lot of that. The younger, they got younger staffers too. And so again, there's an arms race component to it, and they're competing interests as part of it, and it's the messy work of democracy to figure that out.
Steve, the last.
One of the parts of the federal bureaucracy that's critical in here, and which doesn't have younger staff, which could help it understand, is the judiciary. Federal judges are notorious for being technical Luddites. And they hire as staff the most brilliant lawyers who are also technical Luddites. So there is a bit of a movement to at least make available, if not require, technical education as part of continuing judicial education among judges.
It's same with medicine. And same with education.
And
There's
education, I
just
mean-
a ton of activity there, and continuing education requirements that are now coming on this. I mean, Elon's, just in the thick of all of these questions, how do you give homework assignments now? How do you ask people to write term papers?
How do you build critiques and critique structures and.
Well, AI is good at that now. One of the best uses of ChatGPT is to have it write prompts for you. I'm trying to, understand this subject. Here are the things I can think of. What am I not thinking of? How to write the prompts for this. So ChatGPT is generating its own adversarial prompts of ChatGPT, which is kind of fun way to.
Well, you continue, and I hope that this can be this way as our community works together to build faith together. Don't want to challenge you are we really built in the image of God, and seek each other and each other's wisdom, and where is the divine in all of this? We're so appreciative for your joining us. I can't let you go until I mention that we're not shrinking from the responsibility of facing difficult questions. Next week, we'll be looking at just migration. As immigration takes center stage in the political landscape in the United States, how can our faith provide a framework as we engage such an important issue? Amanda Kraft, who is manager of immigration advocacy in the Office of the General Assembly, will lead and actually have a discussion about this issue a couple of days before the election. So thank you all so much for joining us. My email address is carstarr@gmail.com. This is a community. I encourage you to share your ideas and join us continually. The recordings are available for your friends who are not able to join us. Encourage them. The weekly expressions, or you can ask me, but the weekly expressions has the link. Bob Dean's amazing presentation last week. It's beautiful. It's recorded for history. We've got a library of presentations, and Lee We can't thank you enough and look forward to next year.